Simone de Beauvoir, a philosopher of liberation. In the annals of 20th century philosophy and feminist thought, one name reverberates with singular clarity: Simone de Beauvoir. Born into a world shaped by patriarchal norms, entrenched religion, and volatile political upheaval, she emerged not as a passive observer, but as a voice that dissected and reimagined human freedom. Through literature, existentialist philosophy, and radical feminism, de Beauvoir transformed not only how women saw themselves, but how the entire world understood the very nature of identity, autonomy, and moral responsibility. Simone Lucie Ernestine Marie Bertrand de Beauvoir was born on January 9, 1908, into a conservative bourgeois family in Paris. Her father, Georges de Beauvoir, a legal secretary, and her mother, Françoise, a devout Catholic, instilled in her both literary appreciation and strict religiosity. However, Simone's intellectual curiosity transcended the boundaries of her upbringing. From an early age, she challenged authority and questioned the very dogmas she was taught to revere. By adolescence, she had renounced her faith and committed herself to a life governed not by tradition, but by reason and inquiry. De Beauvoir's academic pursuits led her to the Sorbonne, where she studied philosophy at a time when female scholars were a rarity. She excelled in an elite circle of French intellectuals, ultimately ranking second only to Jean-Paul Sartre in the Agrégation, the highly competitive French philosophy examination. At the Sorbonne, she immersed herself in Descartes, Hegel, and Leibniz, but it was the encounter with Sartre that proved most consequential. Their partnership, both personal and intellectual, would redefine the philosophical landscape of the 20th century. Simone de Beauvoir's relationship with Jean-Paul Sartre was a radical experiment in existential love. They forged a pact of intellectual and romantic freedom, eschewing marriage, monogamy, and bourgeois expectations in favor of mutual respect and candid companionship. In Sartre's words, theirs was an essential love, permitting contingent relationships with others. While this arrangement was subject to controversy, it reflected de Beauvoir's commitment to autonomy, especially for women long constrained by possessive ideologies of romantic fidelity. The Second World War plunged Europe into crisis, but for de Beauvoir, it was also a crucible of philosophical insight. Working as a teacher and writer in occupied France, she remained intellectually resistant to fascism and moral complacency. In journals, essays, and fiction, she began exploring themes of freedom, complicity, and the ethics of action, concepts that would later be fully articulated in her philosophical works. Her existentialist leanings, centered on the individual's responsibility to choose and act, were forged in the moral uncertainties of wartime. Existentialism posited that existence precedes essence, that individuals define themselves through their choices, not through any predetermined essence. De Beauvoir extended this philosophy into the moral realm, arguing that true freedom requires the recognition of the freedom of others. Her concept of the other, foundational to later feminist and post-structuralist thought, positioned woman as the objectified, marginalized figure in a male-centered world. For de Beauvoir, ethical living necessitated not only the assertion of one's own agency but the affirmation of the agency of others. Published in 1949, Le Deuxième Sexe, The Second Sex, was a groundbreaking and controversial text that dissected the historical and philosophical roots of female subjugation. Declaring that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, de Beauvoir revealed how gender roles are socially constructed, rather than biologically determined. She examined woman's condition through existentialism, history, psychoanalysis, and literature. The book was initially banned by the Vatican and widely criticized, yet it became a foundational text of modern feminism and catalyzed the second-wave feminist movement. De Beauvoir's intellectual influence soon transcended France. Her work resonated with feminist movements in the United States, Latin America, and beyond. In the 1960s and 1970s, she traveled globally, lecturing and engaging with a new generation of feminists who found in her work a rigorous intellectual framework for their struggles. Despite cultural and political differences, her message was universal. Freedom must be won, not granted, and no society can be just while half its population remains oppressed. In her later years, de Beauvoir turned her attention to the process of aging, the experience of death, and the legacy of memory. Works such as La Vieillesse, The Coming of Age, and Adieu, A Farewell to Sartre reflected both her personal grief and her philosophical interrogation of life's final stages. She remained intellectually active until her death in 1986, continuing to publish essays and mentor younger scholars. Her unwavering pursuit of truth, even in life's twilight, underscored her belief that meaning is something we must continually construct. Simone de Beauvoir passed away on April 14, 1986, and was buried alongside Sartre at Montparnasse Cemetery. But her ideas remain vibrantly alive. In academic philosophy, feminist theory, political activism, and literary criticism, her works continue to shape thought and provoke dialogue. De Beauvoir did not merely theorize about freedom, she lived it. Her legacy is a challenge to all who would remain passive in the face of injustice, to act, to choose, and to demand the right to define oneself. Change your life today. Don't gamble on the future. Act now, without delay. These words encapsulate the ethical urgency that Simone de Beauvoir brought to her life and work. A philosopher, novelist, feminist, and public intellectual, her legacy endures not as a relic of the past, but as a blueprint for the future.